Hello, this is Forest Benedict, LMFT, and author of Life After Lust. And today I have the great privilege of interviewing Dr. Jonice Webb, author of Running on Empty and Running on Empty No More. And just to share a little bit about who she is, she has a PhD in clinical psychology and has been licensed to practice since 1991. She's the author of the best-selling books Running on Empty, Overcome Your Childhood Emotional Neglect, and the newly released Running on Empty No More, Transform Your Relationships. Dr. Webb is a pioneer in the area of childhood emotional neglect. She has been interviewed about the topic on NPR, and her work has been cited or quoted in the Chicago Tribune, CNBC, Yahoo, Psychology Today, the Elephant Journal, and many other national and international media. She writes the popular childhood emotional neglect blog on psychcentral.com and is an expert partner and weekly blogger on yourtango.com. Dr. Webb trains psychologists and therapists in childhood emotional neglect and how to heal it. She also created the groundbreaking Fuel Up for Life Childhood Emotional Neglect online recovery program. And so definitely grateful to have her here today. And just for those that are watching, I wanted to explain a little bit of the backstory as to how she and I connected. And so it was actually when I was writing my book, Life After Lust, that I had quoted her and used some of her material as a resource because I've definitely seen the connection between childhood emotional neglect and sex addiction. And so I reached out to her and just asked for her permission to use that as a resource in my book. And she allowed me to, which I was grateful for. And then once, say that again?
I was happy to.
Yeah, I know. It's so great. I really appreciate that. And then I think the way that worked is I sent you a copy of the book, and you liked it, and invited me to do a kind of a dual interview on Psych Central, what no one ever told you about sex addiction. So we talked more in depth about this connection between CEN and sex addiction. And that was popular. It sounds like there was over 7,000 views.
Oh yeah, I think well beyond that. Yeah.
Oh, awesome. Yeah. So, which is amazing to me. I mean, I think there is some talk of this, but not as specifically as we've talked about. And so that's pretty
hmm
amazing to see. Um, and I've since added your book, Running on Empty and Running on Empty No More, into our Lifestar program here in Fresno, and I found them to be incredible resources for the people that I work with. And personally, I feel like I definitely relate to this on a personal level. So anyways, that's kind of how you and I connected. And um, anything you would add to that as far as our uh, kind of how we've been able to connect and collaborate here?
Well, I think we have some overlap in our followings and the people who, follow your work and people who follow my work.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been really nice to introduce my people to your work and your people to mine. I think it's just been a really positive collaboration all the way around for everybody. So I've really
Yeah,
appreciated it.
yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I think it's great too because um, I don't think like looking at your book, I mean, obviously it doesn't address sex addiction directly, but when we
Right.
talk about the origins of sexual addiction, or probably really every addiction, that those that have experienced childhood emotional neglect really are made vulnerable to all types of addictions, and so it in that sense it really is essential an essential topic to explore, and so um, I really appreciate you.
Thank you. Same here.
And so, can you, just for those that maybe aren't familiar with the term CEN or what that's about, can you explain what that means, CEN?
Absolutely. So CEN means childhood emotional neglect. And it essentially happens when it happens to a lot of people who have no idea that they grew up with it. Basically, all it is when you grow up in a household where feelings are not responded to enough. They're not noticed. Like as a child, your feelings are not really treated as if they matter. And that can be because your parents are too busy, because they're too self-focused, because they're struggling themselves, or because this is how they were raised, is actually the largest number of parents. But if you grow up with your feelings treated as if they're kind of irrelevant or don't matter, you grow up to treat your own feelings that way. Essentially, you have to wall off your feelings as a child. Your brain does this for you just as a coping mechanism. It walls off your feelings so that your feelings will not bother your parents and your family and yourself. And then you grow up lacking this vital resource that helps us all have a happy life and a healthy life and thrive. And that is your emotions. You lack that contact with your emotions that you really need to have. And that's what childhood emotional neglect is, essentially.
Yeah, and I would imagine that would lead to a lot of problems as an adult. I mean, as a child, it may feel like, oh, this is normal. This is the way we deal with feelings or don't deal with feelings. But,
Right.
What would be some of the effects of that into adulthood?
Yes. So as you grow up without access to your feelings, you can have this. The reason I named both of my books Running on Empty and Running on Empty No More is because of the empty sense that you grow up with. It's a feeling like something is missing and you're a little bit different than other people. You feel a little bit left out wherever you are, and like other people have something that you don't have, but you have no idea what it is. And a lot of people struggle to even put what I just described into words. They just feel it. And in addition to that, because you're lacking your feelings, you have trouble connecting with people in a rich and meaningful and deep way, the way that emotions are what make connections. And so when emotions are not there enough, it's hard to connect enough. So you can end up feeling kind of empty and alone and directionless or having trouble finding your way, just because your emotions should be directing you, motivating you, and driving you, and they're walled off. So those are the main parts of it.
Yeah, and I've found that a lot of people that I work with, people that deal with sexual addiction, they already have a sense that something's wrong with them. They already have this deep sense of shame that something's broken within them. Something's uniquely flawed in them. And so it sounds like what you're saying is that maybe some of this feeling could be more than just due to the addiction and the choices they've made, but really goes much earlier than that into childhood.
Yes, absolutely. I think most people who develop addictions, many of them had very loving, well-meaning parents. Some of them didn't, but many of them did. And it's a puzzle. How did this person get this addiction? And it's because this sort of emptiness inside of them is, pulling for something to fill it. And, you can fill it with food, you can fill it with shopping, you can fill it with gambling, you can fill it with, time spent online, you can even fill it with Netflix. You can fill it with all kinds of things, but it's really just the essential lack of your emotions that you're trying to make up for and cope with.
So is it kind of like through doing those experiences, it's like you feel something? I know, like people that use pornography addictively, like it does make you feel things, right? Is that kind of part of what it is? Like this experience, even though it's unhealthy and addictive, is actually helping me feel something?
Yes, absolutely. In Running on Empty, I talked about one person who used skydiving to get just a sense of like a thrill or some kind of emotion. And
Oh, wow.
people don't even realize that they're seeking a feeling,
Mm-hmm.
but that they're trying to fill themselves with. They're trying to just feel something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that does make a lot of sense. And so, when I think about the recovery process, I mean, I already conceptualized recovery from an attachment perspective and really kind of the deficiencies in attachment and in connection really do make people vulnerable to addiction, like we're talking about. And so it sounds like, I mean, the way the language I use is self-connection. That it sounds like these people that have CEN lack self-connection, and that it can really lead to disconnection with other people and themselves, and lots of unhealthy types of behaviors to try and fill that lack of connection.
Yeah, exactly. And that was the reason I wrote my second book, Running on Empty No More, because it's really about once you start to recognize that you have emotional neglect in your childhood,
Mm-hmm.
then you realize that you're having trouble connecting with people, and
Mm-hmm.
people have trouble connecting with you because they can't connect in with your feelings,
Mm-hmm.
and keeps the relationship either one way or shallow or unrealized in its potential, I guess you could say.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's why I'm so grateful that you wrote that second book, because I think what happens to people when they read Running on Empty is they're like, wow, how does this play out? I mean, Running on Empty is great, I think, and you could tell me if this is, how you see it, but I see Running on Empty as more of how do I heal and connect with myself, and then Running on Empty No More is how does this apply to my relationship with my parents and my kids and my partner. Is that kind of how you look at it?
That's exactly how. Yes, that's
Okay.
100% accurate.
Okay, cool. So yeah, I think, and we could feel so lost in how to do that. I mean, obviously, once we realize CEN is a problem, we're like, okay, how do I talk to my parents about this in a way that's, I mean, I know you don't intend for us to blame our parents, or, this could stir up quite a bit of anger towards our parents, when we
Well, some
realize.
deserve blame, though.
Yeah,
So,
okay. So can you share more about that?
what was that?
What do you mean by that? Can you share more about that?
Well, parents who really are just bad parents because they either don't care or they're too self-involved
Mm,
can deserve blame. So I'm really not against people blaming their parents when their parents
mm-hmm,
deserve it.
mm-hmm,
A lot of people who have CEN have it because their parents grew up this way too. Their
mm-hmm,
parents grew up with their parents under responding to their emotions, and so
mm-hmm.
they're kind of blind to the emotion world, and so they don't see their children's emotions just like they don't see their own. And those
Okay.
parents, I don't think, deserve blame. They're just doing the best they can with what they have.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that there's two different groups there.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And so your book guides people through how to kind of get into both of those scenarios, like how to respond to parents in both of those scenarios?
Yeah, so I talk about the three different kinds of parents, which are the first, the self-involved,
Mm,
those deserve. The second group are struggling, and those are people who are like struggling financially or taking care of a family member or depressed or something like that, but really trying to be a good parent, but just don't have the bandwidth. And the third group are the ones I just talked about, the people, the parents who were neglected themselves as they were growing up.
mm,
And depending on which of the three groups your parents fall in, you may or may not decide to try to talk with them about it.
mm-hmm.
And of course, the first group are the hardest ones. The self-involved are the hardest parents to try to talk with about it.
Mm-hmm.
So there are all different kinds of considerations to take into account.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And these would be very difficult conversations to have, I think, for most of us. Trying to talk about something that was never talked about. And so I think it's so helpful to have your book. And obviously, some people will need more help than that, maybe getting into therapy or with a CEN therapist or something like that.
Definitely.
And what about talking to your kids or maybe changing, maybe you don't talk about it, but how does this relate to parents? Because I know I certainly am very aware of this as a parent. Like, I really don't want to do the same thing to my kids. I really want to, I'm already aware of this as a father and a therapist. Like, how do I not, how do I make emotion a topic of conversation and create the type of responsiveness or learn to respond to them in a way that won't emotionally neglect them?
Yeah, I think obviously it depends on what age the kids are.
Mm-hmm.
There are certain things you can do that apply to all age kids, from small adult children even.
Mm-hmm.
And those things that you can do are to ask more questions, and initiate more contact, whether it's just talking with them or calling them, whatever that might be, and using more emotion words. That works with every age group. You can do it with toddlers. You can do it with adults. Just keeping emotion words in mind and trying to use them more is a way to connect and start introducing that concept of feelings into the relationship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and that it definitely feels like you would need to have done some of your own work first. Like, how can you see your children's emotions if you don't even know what your own emotions are? Is that kind of what you see? Is that people really do have to kind of start with their own work, start naming their own emotions um, before they can start to see those in other people?
That's very important. I mean, I think any parent should be aware of what they're feeling, and
Mm-hmm.
if a parent is kind of lacks that ability, the better you get at being in touch with yourself, the better you're going to be in touch with your child. If they just go hand in hand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm sure that would also apply to your partner. Like, if you're in a relationship with someone, the more you can connect with your own feelings and even, I think, name them, then you can communicate them better to your partner and also see their feelings and respond to them. And that's kind of the type of therapy that I would even recommend to people would be like EFT or something that helps them learn how to attach, learn how to deal with this kind of like scary and undefined realm of emotions.
Yes, absolutely. And sometimes with couples, I will give, because I see a lot of couples in my practice. I'll give them a worksheet to take home where they guess what their partner is feeling at certain times during every day.
Oh, wow.
And then when they advance enough, they can start checking with their partner and see if they were right.
Oh, that's great.
And as long as they're both doing it, it really they can educate each other really quickly about what's really going on and be incredibly connecting and helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that sounds really, really helpful to have an exercise like that where you're learning how to do this. Have you found that people with CEN have difficulty like engaging in this process? Like, realizing, wow, I want to work on this. I realize that this is an issue. Like, is it difficult to get people to realize that, like it seems like there would be shame about it, like, oh man, what's wrong with me? Or have you found that people are more, um, taking ownership and deciding, hey, I really do want to change this?
I think it varies a lot.
Yeah.
And part of it, if there are any therapists watching this, part of it is how you introduce it to your clients.
Oh, right.
But I think really important factors that help people want to deal with this are the fact that it's not their fault. They didn't choose emotional
Mm-hmm.
neglect.
Mm-hmm.
So they need to stop blaming themselves. And also the fact that it's not an illness, it's not like a disease. It's just a lack of connection with your emotions and a certain lack of skills, which are the emotion skills, and all of that can be fixed. So it's completely fixable. And it's partly, again, this is why I wanted to write this second book, because I wanted people to see exactly what it's like when an individual or a couple or family is healing from emotional neglect. Because when you can see how much you have to gain, it's very motivating. Right.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like, through self-connection and through connecting with others, like, I mean, it's kind of like, it sounds like the process brings you to life. Like I mean, once you feel emotion and see it and begin to connect with people, it's like, it seems like that would be profound.
It is. I liken it to watering a plant that has been without water, like not quite enough water its whole life, and then you start like adding the right amount, more and more. The more water it gets, the more it just kind of fills out and becomes what it should be. And I've watched people go through that so many times. It's just amazing and wonderful.
Yeah.
It's energizing.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it must be very fulfilling work when you see people engage in the process and actually begin to enjoy their lives more.
Yeah. So, do you use you talk with your clients about CEN, and do you find that do you have problems getting them to connect to the idea and want to work on it? Because I would expect that you would. It's not that easy.
Yeah. Well, I use your book. I guess I let you explain it through your book. I give them questions to, um, as a way to engage with your book. But yeah, it's definitely difficult. I find, and I don't know if this is actually answering your question, but I find that it's like it ruins their childhood or their view of their childhood, but in the best way, in a way that they need to see in order to get the healing that is to come. And so again, I let you introduce it through your books, and then I definitely engage them in the conversation and then the processing of how this applies to them, and then how they can use this information to recover. And I do think that the people that take this seriously and really see recovery from an attachment standpoint and realize, okay, recovery isn't just me stopping the unhealthy behaviors, but recovery is me connecting with myself, with my partner, with my higher power, that the connection really is the opposite of addiction. That's really what the healing is about. And that's profound. I mean, that really is what recovery is about. And so the clients that grab hold of that idea and understand it really do get the deepest healing, I think.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And so again, I think any therapist watching this, especially those dealing with people struggling with addiction, especially sexual addiction, um, should definitely use your books as a resource. And don't you have some kind of, do you have training for therapists as well?
Yeah, I have a training on goodtherapy.org.
Okay.
which people who are a member can watch for free. And that's a 2-hour training. And then in June, I'm going to be doing a recovery retreat, a CEN recovery retreat at Kripalu Retreat Center in Western Massachusetts. And that is for lay people and therapists. And it offers continuing education credits for social workers and psychologists.
Okay. That's great.
Excited about that.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I feel like I understand the concepts, but I also would benefit. It's interesting because I would benefit from the training as a therapist, but I'm certain I would also benefit from doing my own work in this area because I definitely relate to that on a personal level as well.
Because I think a lot of therapists grew up with childhood emotional neglect, and it led them to become therapists because they grew up feeling like what's missing, something's wrong, and then they started discovering what it was by going into the mental health field. And then they end up finding this CEN topic and saying, yes, that's it. So all fits together.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. That's awesome. And I think that would be so essential for a therapist to do their own work in this area, because I there's definitely times when I feel overwhelmed by the client's emotions, and if I'm not really aware of my own emotions and able to connect with them and not feel like their emotions are bigger than me, like that's a pretty big deal for a therapist, I think, to have done their own work and to not be intimidated by the client's emotions.
It is, yes, a very big deal. I agree.
Great. Well, thank you so much for sharing. I think that gives a really good kind of broad perspective on what CEN is and kind of what the healing can look like. Is there anything else maybe that we didn't touch on that you think people exploring this topic should really be aware of?
Yes. If someone is watching and wonders if childhood emotional neglect could have happened to them, it's possible because it's so unmemorable and so invisible, so it's hard to know. I created a questionnaire called the CEN questionnaire, and it's on my website that anyone can take. It's free. You just sign up, and it joins you to my newsletter, and also you can take the questionnaire for free at your convenience, and that's at emotionalneglect.com.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds like a great resource. I'm sure I've taken that questionnaire. But yeah, just so if people are watching this, and even if they don't think this applies to them, that it probably would be good to just explore and see if it might be a possibility that it's part of their experience.
Yeah.
And so you mentioned some of your resources. So where would you say, where can people follow you, or where can people read more of your work? Obviously, we've mentioned both books, but what else is there that you're providing that people could be aware of?
Well, there's a lot of information on my website, emotionalneglect.com. There's my childhood emotional neglect blog on psychcentral.com. And also I have, I'm a partner with yourtango.com. So I also have a blog on that website as well. Okay.
And you're on Facebook as well, right?
Yep, I'm on Facebook, I'm on Twitter, and my handle is at JWEBBPhD.
Okay.
And what else? LinkedIn. I'm all over. I'm all over the internet.
Yeah. One thing I've noticed is you create tons of content like all the time, and I do that too. I create a lot of content, and so I appreciate that about you, and I think you're making a huge impact. I know that we often don't see all of the results of the stuff that we do online and whatever else, but I hope you trust that you are making a huge impact in the world.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much for saying that. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and I keep, every now and then I keep sharing your stuff all over the place. So I will continue to be a super fan and continue to, share with the world the things that you're creating. So again,
Thank you so much.
yeah. No, it's my pleasure. I become anytime I find a resource that I think is helpful to clients and other people. Um, I mean, it's meaningful to me to get that out into the hands of the people that need it. So, all
Yes.
right. Well, again, thank you so much for your time and sharing your expertise in this area. I look forward to sharing this with those that need it as well. And again, it's been great talking with you. It's an honor, and I wish you the best as you continue to get the word out there about your books and the work that you're doing.
Thank you, Forrest, and I wish all the same for you.
Thank you.